Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of The Suspense is Killing Me. Do I even have to introduce Red Lagoe, the master?
Probably do.
You're the first repeat offender on the show.
Oh,
You're the yeah.
I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for screen time.
That's right. That's right. And although Alex Ebenstein may try and take that title from you because we did 2 episodes as the first 2 episodes of the show, it was actually one interview and I broke it in half. So technically, you're the first
there
returning. There you go.
Alex
There
is
you
great.
go.
You should have Alex on again.
I will.
Yeah.
Maybe even against his will. I don't know. We'll see.
Tie him up.
That's right. He'll write another great book and I'll be like, get over here. And that was for Curse Corvus. And then right after that, he had put out Attack of the Melonheads. No, Melonhead Mayhem. Get my lines crossed. I'm getting that confused with Attack of the Killer Tumbleweeds from Antonia Rachel Ward. But yeah, so you're officially the first repeat interview. So you get a crown or something cool. A Burger King crown.
Like I'll take a crown.
That's right. Well, and one of the reasons you get to come back is because you freaking keep putting out awesome books. So the first time it was we were in the end of the summer, I think, maybe early fall. And you had just released your collection.
Yes. Yeah. That was for Impulses of a Necrotic Heart.
I loved it. And I got to ask you about snakes coming out of people's upper regions.
Yes. Yeah. I don't even know what to say. For a while,
I didn't know how to ask about it.
I was calling them titty snakes for a while.
That works. I didn't even know how to ask. At the time, I didn't know you at all. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
how am I going to
go up to a woman and say titty snakes?
Yeah, I'm like, how am I going to ask about this? Like, I don't even know how to describe what's happening. I didn't even realize what was happening until it was like toward the latter part of that story. And I was like, okay, that's exactly what I thought was happening. But I didn't know how to like place it in my head. It was that good. I mean, it was really what a wonderful group of stories. And I'm still to this day pushing Impulses of a Necrotic Heart on people like all the time.
Thank you.
It is kind of like my standard for collections. If you're looking for a collection produced in like the last year that I think really hit it out of the park, like on all fronts, because you did so much work in that book, not only the writing, but the art and everything. I'm like, you got to check this out. So yeah, I'm a little bit of a fanboy for that book.
Well, thank you.
Well, and it got me really excited to dive into In Excess of Dark, because you told me then that you had this thing coming out, and I was like, oh God, I can't wait to hear about this. And I was grateful that I was able to get an advanced copy from Darklit as part of their, and it wasn't exclusive, guys. They were, on their Facebook page, they had announced to people, I think it was on their Facebook page, that they had put it on NetGalley and that you could request a copy through NetGalley. So I ran kicking, as fast as I could to NetGalley on the internet and downloaded the book and then started reading it immediately. And I was hoping that we'd have a chance to talk about it soon. So I reached out to you and I was like, hey, can we talk about In Excess of Dark? And you were like, let's do it. Yes. So, we're recording this literally on the last day of January, 2024. So it's January 31st, but the book comes out, which date?
March 15th.
March 15th. Okay.
March 15th. Yeah. We're like not even 2 months away.
Love it.
Yeah. Holy cow. Less than 2 months. I don't even know what to do. So I'm going to have copies at AuthorCon. If anybody is going to AuthorCon in Williamsburg in April,
yep,
I'll have it for sale there.
Awesome. I can't wait to see everybody at AuthorCon. And I feel like I missed out. Well, I did miss out last year completely because I was on a trip when I found out it was happening. I was like, I'm going to be out of town, and I missed it. And then this year I was like, all right, we're going. But I didn't know you were going to have so you're going to have print copies of the book at AuthorCon?
Oh yeah. I sure will.
All right. Well, I will be bringing my credit card.
You're going to need it. There's a lot. There's so many books at AuthorCon. There's so much.
Dude, I spent $350 at Halloween Hangover.
Did you?
And Yeah. I came home and I was like, look at all the cool things I got. My wife is like, excuse me. Did you just go shopping? I was like, this person was great. And I met this dude and I met her and they were so fantastic. Look at this book. And she was just like, okay, you only get to do this like 3 times a year.
Yeah, AuthorCon is great for that. People walk around with rolling carts to buy their books. And they fill up their carts and travel back home. Hundreds and hundreds of dollars on books.
Wow.
Yeah.
I might, hey, look, I knew something was up as soon as I tried to get a table. So for those that aren't familiar with AuthorCon, it is a great place for a ton of horror writers to connect with readers. And it's basically like one huge like book like integration event. I call it that because it's not just a sales thing. It's like you get to go and meet the authors and everything's there and everyone's all together in one spot.
Yeah, and there's readings and there's panels and parties.
I can't wait.
Good time.
I cannot wait. It's 20 minutes from my house. It's gonna be a little dangerous. I was offering to receive shipments to my house because like I've got room with my basement. I'm like telling people like, hey, if you need to ship things from out of town or you're worried about them getting to the hotel or whatever, just send them to my house. I'll throw them in my truck and bring them to the hotel for you.
Yeah, I've got a couple people shipping things my way, so I can bring them because we're in the same area. But I'm about an hour away.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the book, but I don't want to ruin the book. So guys, listen, it's me. I'm the one kind of trying to bound the conversation. Don't pick on Red. I don't want to ruin this story for you guys. It is absolutely worth every bit of time you're going to spend reading this book. It's a really like creative dive into a lot of pretty heavy themes. At first I thought it was like just straight up going to be grief horror. And we'll talk about this a little bit, but it's way more than that. And I say that as someone who wrote a novella focused on grief horror, kind of, elements. And I wasn't as free with my book, as you were. You took your book to other places, which I thought was really good because it adds a lot of dimension to the story that I think enhances it for the reader. So I was a little jealous at one point. I'm not going to lie, Red. I was like, hey, I want a chainsaw. I don't have a chainsaw in my story.
Yeah, but your story, the chainsaw would be misplaced. You need to put a chainsaw in a different story.
It's so good.
It'd be a little out of place in your story. Your story was more haunting and sad and
yeah
it focused a lot more on the grief than whatever weird shit I did with my book.
Well, your weird shit inspired me because now I have to find some way to get a chainsaw in one of my stories. And when I do, I will dedicate the chainsaw to the influence of Red Lagoe.
Thank you.
So for those that aren't familiar with the book, can you give us like give us the back cover kind of explanation of what exactly the unsuspecting reader may find in Excess of Dark?
Okay, so you see, I do this every time I go to talk about one of my books. I forget to prepare my little pitch for it, and I haven't said this pitch in a couple years, so
that's all right.
All right. So originally, I pitched In Excess of Dark as Laurel Hightower's Crossroads. The exploration of grief, like Laurel Hightower's Crossroads, meets the snowball into weirdness of Eric LaRocca's Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. That's how I pitched it to the presses, because it's about a woman who is already grieving and she's already suffering from depression, and she experiences something else that causes trauma in her life, and she loses more loved ones. And this is because a lot of the things that she's imagining, a lot of the terrible things that she's imagining is manifesting as reality. And it's about her dealing with that.
By the way, terrifying proposition for horror writers. So if you're a writer and you read this book, immediately you're like, okay, maybe I need to stop being what I am. It's like, are the things I'm thinking gonna come true? Like, this is terrifying. So Red is intentionally trying to give all the writers out there nightmares with that
Yeah,
premise.
when I was younger, I'd like have things like deja vu, or I'd have a dream and something similar would happen, or something would happen, and I'd tell my mom about it and she'd be all freaked out. She'd be like, "Whoa." Careful. And then I tell her about another weird dream. She goes, "Whoa, don't go anywhere." I'm like, "Mom, it's not going to come true." She's like, "I know, you know the way your mind is."
Dude, you're gonna end up like with a scarlet letter. It's like, except not for the same reasons, but you'll end up like your mom's gonna. You're lucky you grew up when you did, because if it was like, during the time of the Salem witch trials, that could have been really bad for you.
Yeah, it could have been.
It could have been real bad. Yeah. So I've got to ask. Well, so okay. First of all, my facial expression when you mentioned Eric LaRocca,
Mm-hmm.
when I was reading the story, I was like, this feels like there's some layers of his work, similar, not inspired by or inspiring, right, but just I got that same feeling as when I actually listened. I couldn't read it. I had to listen to it because I was driving back and forth to StokerCon last year. Everything the Darkness Eats. Mm-hmm. And so I was trying to place that when I was reading, I'm like, I've got this feeling of like kind of like this same like multi-dimensional kind of horror. Mm-hmm. You nailed it. When you said that, I was like, yep, that's it. That's exactly where I last felt that. So that's really great pitch, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Because you knew what I was thinking. And then I loved Laurel's book, Crossroads. I mean, it was just really good.
That's I feel like kind of the vein your story was in, was kind of in the vein of Laurel's, at least that mood and that the tone of it. That's the way it felt.
And she really pulled some tension into that story. So for those that haven't read Crossroads, you got to go check it out. And again, I don't want to spoil it, but just the, losing someone that important in your life. Mm-hmm. And then this like correlation between something that she can do and trying to experience that person in the afterlife. Oh, I was like, what if this goes further? Which is what that's why she wrote the book she did.
Yeah.
Really good. So, okay. So one very early starter question that I had in the reading was, where did this idea come from? Like manifesting something in our minds, we often keep, especially, those of us who are more, have shades of introversion in our lives, in our personalities, tend to keep things like that to ourselves, especially if we're not surrounded by people that we can just freely share some of our darker thoughts and kind of personality traits with. Someone that is having these tragic recurring thoughts. Where did the inspiration come from, where you're like, what if, like, I know you had said that when you were younger, your mom, you'd share things with your mom. Is that where that all was born from?
It's part of it. So this particular story was kind of born in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I went camping spring 2022 with my family, and it's called a primitive campground, but there are campsites. There's no hookups. There is a bathroom, but no showers. So it's kind of primitive. There's not a lot of families there. There are only a few other campers there when we were there. So we're fairly alone. And it was just, I just remember sitting alone a lot of times because I'm up before my family. And so I'd sit outside in the woods and just, jot down some ideas. And, my imagination has always been very dark, and it goes to the what ifs. What if that noise in the forest is not a squirrel, that kind of thing. And there are scenes that I imagined that ended up in excess of dark. And so that's where it all started, was like I had these ideas, I had these images while I was camping, and I brought those home and I started trying to work on a way to I guess manifest it into a book, without it just being a bunch of random kill scenes. And that's when I took the idea of the woman who makes things happen just by thinking of them, and that did spawn from when I was younger. And my mom would, and I think she jokes about it most of the time, like, oh, you know, things you dream, they come true. So I started leaning into that because I have horrible daydreams sometimes of, you know, the what if scenarios, like what if this happens to my family, what if my daughter goes out and doesn't come home, you know, what if my husband doesn't come home, what if I lose these people, and those dark thoughts, those what ifs, those really hard what ifs, are the ones that like we don't like to think about very long. And so I leaned into it and wrote a book about it.
Well, I know it doesn't sound like it was like the most, you know, enjoyable experience because you're trying to get away from some of these dark things, but I'm glad you did because you got a really good book out of it.
Oh, thank you.
It's like really good.
Thank you.
It's a really good read. You know, it made me think about when I was younger, I was in creative writing classes and I wasn't necessarily doing great in school or behaving well, you know, all those things. And I would keep some of those darker thoughts to myself, but then I was encouraged to like let them go, right? Like talk them out, write them out. I started writing them out. I got in trouble for writing them out because, yeah, I mean, kind of get in trouble when it involves real people.
Yeah.
It's like, so I'm the whole time I'm reading this, I'm like, boy, do I know what that feels like, to feel like there's a risk of, you know, you do have these wild, crazy, dark visions, but you're definitely going to suffer the repercussions if you allow them to come to the light. And you know, that could be in something as harmless as writing or music or something like that. But what happens when it goes beyond that? It gets into the, you know, physically realized in our world, which is kind of the premise of the book, which is awesome. So it was something I immediately, like, it's like a tuning fork. It's like immediately like resonated with me. So you explained the connection with camping. That was one of the things I was going to ask about, is like, were you in the Blue Ridge Mountains? Did you experience this? The book is set here in Virginia. Shout out Hampton Roads. I was like, hey, look at this. Red's putting Norfolk in here and Virginia Beach. And that there may have been a reference to Suffolk. But I might be imagining that one. But it was really good to read about the state of Virginia in there, because, you know, that's where we live, in the state of Virginia. And it is such a dynamic state. And I feel like to people that live on the coast, sometimes the mountains do represent exactly what you put in the book, where, you know, they're an escape, but they're not somewhere you can stay. And we're encouraged in this state to kind of experience all the different elements. And you were inspired by a trip to the Blue Ridge, which I think is awesome. There's a lot of Appalachian horror kind of starting to emerge a bit more. Was the emergence of Appalachian kind of storytelling, was that at all baked into the calculus, or was that just, you know, good circumstance?
No, it was strictly just because I was there. I was in the mountains and inspired by my surroundings, and so that's just where the idea was. What the story originally was going to be, a lot more, I don't know, fun, I think. It was going to be, so my original vision for it, actually, when I first started writing it, after Karina loses her people, she just like goes off into the mountains, and she was just going to be hiking through the mountains on a solo adventure. That's what the whole book was going to be. It was going to be her solo hiking through the Blue Ridge and having all these things happen. But But as I started writing that, I don't know, it didn't feel right. Nothing felt right. It felt very disconnected from the character. And when I went back and focused on her grief after the accident, that's when everything just started falling in place. Because originally it wasn't really focused on her grief. There was just going to be a bunch of weird shit that happened. There were characters for body counts. It was going to be more just kind of a fun slashery kind of horror story. But once I started writing, it became a lot more.
Gotcha. Well, thank God you didn't. Thank God you did change the trajectory of the story, because without it, I wouldn't have gotten the chainsaw scene. So
no, that's probably
completely
not.
selfish. Being super selfish right now, because that was a part for me. I put in my notes in the book, it says yes in capital letters with exclamation marks. Like, yes, it was like a great moment for me as a reader of 80s and 90s stuff. So
I was really worried. I was so worried about putting it in there. I did think it might be too much, but but it just seemed like the only natural thing that she would do in that moment. She wasn't going to go to the hospital to take care of the situation.
Well, you know, I was a fan just because it was a fun moment in the book. You know, you're talking about having fun moments in the book.
Yeah.
I think you kept, you know, by taking the less fun route, you kept a really fun thing in play.
Yeah.
It was really good. I enjoyed it. Also, I was happy because of the, you know, novellas kind of present a challenge when it comes to numbers of characters and how in depth you can get with dialogue and all the things, because they eat up, you know, word count and all the things. But and that's a very surface level thing to say, but the reality is, if you want to tell a complete story, you can only dive so far with a certain number of characters in a compact book like that. And I really liked that you were able to bring in what I felt was like just the right number of characters to develop excellent depth. I got to, you know, understand all of your characters really well. I'm interested about the store. So in the book, she has a friend, and her friend runs a store. We have a place like that here in Williamsburg, kind of like an old school apothecary kind of spiritual store, with the crystals and different types of mystical arts and all the things. And I immediately saw my local store in the depiction that you had. Is that a real store, hypothetically, in Norfolk that you go to?
It's not. No. No, I made it up. It is a real location. Like I'm imagining an actual location with the shops upstairs. It's an actual the store location takes place in a real space, but the store itself is not there. My husband and I, God, like not even, I don't know, maybe like 20 years ago, we used to shop there. We used to go up. It was a little record store on the second floor with these big windows, and so I just imagined that as our little Onyx. What is it called? I don't even remember the name of the store. Something in Onyx.
Was there an Oddities in there?
Oddities.
Yeah.
I wrote the book. I can't remember the name of the store.
Well, we got 2 out of 3. I know there's 3 words there. It was Onyx, Oddities, and something.
Yeah.
Other oddities? I don't know.
Occult? Onyx?
Yeah, maybe. But I thought that was really cool because you don't see people pull elements in quite often like that, where there's a tie to something. Well, so let me expand on that a little bit without any spoilers. So that is a cool place for you to meet other characters that are in the story that have some kind of background with like weird stuff happening, right? It's like a little bit on like the medium kind of side, even though not necessarily that kind of traditional medium look. But I thought it was really cool that you used the premise of a store to kind of introduce that layer to the story. I thought that was really cool.
Oh, thank you. I was worried because this story, I mean, the main character could have experienced it all on her own, didn't really need the other characters. Right. But like, there's no way to introduce the possibilities of what was going on. Not realistically anyway. So I did need other characters. So I was worried they were going to come off, I don't know, a little contrived. Well, I guess it's all contrived, but a little forced. So yeah, I'm glad that they came across as good characters.
Yeah, they did. And I liked that there was conflict with the best friend when it came to realities. And she was like kind of like giving the harsh, like sisterly love kind of treatment by her best friend. And that's what you kind of rely on people like that to do for you in your life. But what happens when it really is unbelievable stuff? It's kind of where that goes. And I thought it was great. You really managed that relationship really well. Okay, so let's unpack the grief element for a moment, because as you said, inspired or not inspired by, but related to books like Laurel Hightower's Crossroads. There's grief horror has gotten a lot of, I think, good attention lately. And we kind of were joking around a little bit beforehand about, to me, one of the most impactful grief horror stories ever was Pet Sematary, right? From Stephen King. I mean, I remember my daughter watching it for the first time because she's a huge 80s and 90s horror movie fan. And I said, you've got to watch Pet Sematary. So she watches it. She's 12. She watches it. She's like, that was just sad. And I was like, yeah, it really was. That's kind of the thing, is it terrifies you and it's sad. And you can do both of those things at the same time. Why write about grief? I mean, is there a reason why you decided to build grief as one of the main themes in this book in particular, or was it just like a natural fit for the story based on the causes of the conflict in the story?
Yeah, the latter. It was it was basically just that's what the character experienced, and she didn't fill up with this darkness until she experienced these traumas. And like I said earlier, originally she wasn't going to really get into the grief, so the book wasn't really going to be a grief focused. It was going to be more about her journey and overcoming. But as I wrote it, it felt unnatural for her to just journey on, because I envision it kind of like Descent, that she experiences her grief in the beginning and then she goes on this adventure with her friends. And so I was kind of leaning more toward the Descent when I first set out to write this, at least in that vein. And when I took a step back and realized my character wasn't making sense, her journey wasn't making sense, none of it was making sense, I realized it was, well, does her people died. Like she needs to take a minute and sit alone in the house and experience that.
Well, and I think it adds a layer to the fear that is, why are these visions, why are we afraid to manifest what we think? If these things happen, what are we really fearing? We're fearing the repercussions of those things coming to fruition. The repercussions are, loss, violence, like all the things that could cause emotional response from people. Because not everybody that falls prey to these types of things in life are our loved ones, right? Some of them are people we really just can't wait for something bad to happen to. Not that I wish ill will on any living person, but there's been a time or two in life where I'm like, buddy, I can't wait till you get what's coming to you.
When are they going to start dropping anvils out of the sky?
Yeah, all those cartoons I watched. Yeah, I mean, like, there's a reality there. It's like I don't fear that outcome as much as I fear this outcome, and the fear of this outcome, because it is so impactful, and the experience for you as a grieving person is so unbearably difficult and painful that you fear that outcome. To me, it was just a natural, like, hand in glove kind of moment for this book, where I was grateful that you dove into the grief elements of this story and didn't kind of gloss over them to get to something different.
Yeah.
I'm
glad I did too. And it was like a switch when I realized the little light bulb over my head, because I was just stuck. Like, okay, she's in the mountains. Now what? I guess she's going to see some weird shit. Like, I just felt, everything felt wrong. And so, as soon as I had that moment, it was just like a everything fell into place. I'm like, and I did the like, I did the evil laugh. I knew exactly what I had to do.
Yeah, because now that she's this deep, right? Now that she's got this much influencing her, what is she going to do? Like, she'll make these, otherwise probably she wouldn't normally make these kinds of decisions in her life.
Right.
But you're under different circumstances now.
Yeah, Karina was grappling with her own sanity too, because she doesn't know what's real and what's not. But she feels like what she is seeing is definitely real, and so she knows what she needs to do, or she thinks she knows what she needs to do, whereas everybody else around her is telling her that she's insane.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the grief stuff to me is natural, everyday horror. Like, it's real. We can touch it. We can feel it. We see it in life. Mm-hmm. That makes it really scary because it's, the probability of us experiencing grief is pretty high in life. Mm-hmm. And it can be crushing. And so I love that you can explore that without exploiting it. You didn't exploit this person's grief to tell a story, which I thought was fantastic. Great balance. Now, with that being said, when we go from something like putting, like, telling a really good story like this, you're taking elements like that we can all relate to, that we can all name somebody, if not ourselves, that have experienced grief of extreme depth. You can also introduce things that you did bring into this story that I'd like to unpack a little bit. Supernatural, kind of paranormal experiences, mystical kind of stuff that you did a really good job of touching on different ways. Like, she sees certain things in the woods. She experiences certain things in the house. Like, there's all this different, like, it almost makes it so she can't really trust the world she's living in anymore. Where, as the person like dreaming this story up and putting this character who you've kind of beloved and you've wrapped her in this nice little package, you said these things are all possible. Now you get to put her in this world and open the possibilities. Did you intentionally dive into, like, did you start the story meaning to go, okay, we're going to see some crazy shit out in the woods and then some things are going to happen to other people and it's going to be otherworldly kind of stuff. Did you set out to do that in the beginning, or was that something that kind of came with the writing?
I don't remember. I don't think, I mean, I had certain scenes I know I wanted to play out, but how other characters were going to interact with those, I don't think I set out knowing that until I got into the story. So I think it was later, as I was writing, that I knew how everybody was going to fall into place.
Gotcha. Hey, there's some innocent people here, folks, that are going to run into the wrong person that day. I'm just telling you, it's going to happen. It's like, don't go up the trail. Don't knock on the door. Don't do these things. Yeah. So I love that you were able to bring society into this person's experience and that you didn't just keep it contained to the house, because you could have very easily just taken your character, given her this extreme grief, put her in isolation, wrapped her in this very small layer of people, right? Immediate circle of people, and called it a day. And no one probably would have been the wiser. But you intentionally explored this person with this circumstance, interacting with people in society, and it not changing the basis of the story. Like, it's still happening. These things are still there, which takes it outside of the haunted house, haunted property type world of work, where it's like, I write haunted house stories and I've had my dev editor go, can this happen? We're not in the house. And I'm like, well, is it in their head? Like all these things. You took that character and put him right out in the world with people, and no one was safe. And I love that about that. Like, that was a good thing.
Yeah, because she's the one that, I mean, grief haunts the person. So it doesn't matter where she goes. She's going to be haunted everywhere.
Right. Okay. So can we talk about some of the fun stuff?
Yeah, please.
Where did the chainsaw idea come from? Does your husband do woodworking? Do you
He
do
doesn't.
woodworking?
He doesn't. I have
Okay.
a stepbrother who does. He
Okay.
did for a short time. He did some chainsaw stuff. But I don't. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I have a chainsaw. I've used it. I cut, when branches fall out of the tree or something, and we need some
Yeah.
firewood for the campfire out back. But
Excellent.
I don't know. Oh, okay. So I think what happened was when I was first writing the book, I placed the chainsaw in the story
Hmm.
just in case I wanted to use it later. I was like, well, if it's ridiculous, I can get rid of it.
Gotcha. It's a safe place.
You never know when you're going to need a chainsaw in a horror
You
story,
don't. I mean,
so
it's
you
a
gotta
very
just write one into the beginning. If you don't use it, you can you can take it out in editing.
I'm glad you did. Okay, so the other thing was the military connection. So you and I've talked about this before, military families. And in the story, your character was prior Navy
Mhm,
and her spouse is Navy,
mhm.
right? And so did you feel like infusing that into the story was just like a natural thing? Because we live in this little bubble as military families. We kind of like, this is our world. It's almost like we don't really think about how unique an experience that is, but you bring that into the story, and I was like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, it wasn't really necessary to the story. They could have had literally any jobs in the past. But that's just what I wrote because that's what I know. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
not military. My husband's military, but I wrote the character who was prior service. And her husband stayed in for the long run. But that didn't have to be their jobs. And I was actually wondering if the editor was going to be like, "Why are they military? Like, what does this matter to the story?" But I mean, what does it matter if they're anything? Like, what does it matter if they were,
Yeah.
worked in an office?
Well,
I
I
mean, it
liked
just
it.
happened to be what they do.
I
Well,
liked
thank
it.
you. Yeah, thank
I
you.
mean, not just selfishly because I have that same connection, but mostly because I thought it really, I mean, Hampton Roads is a huge military town.
Yeah.
So having this story occur here and then having that type of connection really kind of is true to the identity of this area. Not that everyone is in the military around here, but it
Mhm.
is, I would venture to say, especially on the South side, it's hard to, throw a stone in a room and not hit somebody that's
Yeah.
either in the
Yeah.
military or in a military family. So I really did like that you put that element in there, but you didn't make it a huge part of the story. It wasn't like it
Mhm.
occurred on a base, or you didn't pull any type of military fiction into it, or history or any of that stuff.
Yeah, no.
That's good. So that was the first layer. The second
Mhm.
one was the plastics. And I asked you about this, and I apologize to everyone listening right now. Poor Red. She's going to have to endure a question or two about this because I shared with her that I had a education in industrial engineering. And when I'm reading her story, she talks about plastics manufacturing. And I'm like, did Red work in plastics? And then you
Yes, I
said,
did. I did work in plastics.
that's awesome.
Fresh out of high school, I worked at a plastics factory. I worked there while I worked there for a couple of years, and then I went to school. And while I was in school, I'd come home for the summer and work in the plastics factory. So I still remember the smells. I did quality control, so I inspected plastic, I measured it, and
There you go.
complained to the people when they weren't within specifications.
They love that. The machinery operators.
Yep. Well, no, the toolman, the what do you call them? Can't remember what
Yeah.
they're called. Like the foreman who ran. I
Yep.
used to have to go tell the foreman when parts weren't being made right, and they'd tell me I was wrong, and I'd tell them no,
You're like, it's
and
out of
then they'd fix
specification.
it.
Yeah. There's, and you're observing trends and all the things. I was happy to be reading that because I was like, oh, look, someone knows what they're talking about, because I could tell by the way you had written those areas of the book that you had actually had experience in it.
Yeah, injection molding. So
Yep.
like it's one of the, I guess the a bit of a metaphor in the book with the
Yes.
the in plastic mold filling up too much and some of it squeezing out.
I mean, I'm such a nerd. I was like, this is great. I was like, that part really hit home for me. I was like, great. Yeah, great way to take that and incorporate it into the story and kind of pull that whole theme together, because yeah, it is a big part of the story. This person can't contain all of this. I will not explore further that element without, because
Yeah.
I don't want to give spoilers. But guys, you have to understand that, like, in excess of dark, like the excess part really matters in this story. This isn't just a cool title.
It's all about
There,
plastic.
yeah, it's all about plastic. You're gonna love it. But it was really good to read a story that kind of talked about the boundaries of these things and what happens when we surpass our boundaries. Maybe even the boundaries becoming part of the problem. The fact that you have boundaries can be an issue. It's not always about keeping things in the line. Sometimes you have to let things bleed over a bit. Or else. Or else you get a chainsaw for Christmas. Okay, so was there anything about this story that kind of surprised you when you were writing it? Like, did you get to a point in the book where you were like, okay, this is really cool. I wasn't planning this cool, but it came out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The entire end. I didn't know it was going to go that way. I thought it was going to end a little more, I don't know, I guess resolved in a slightly nicer way.
Gotcha.
But I don't know, I got toward the end and it just felt like this character was on a different path. And if I told it a different way that may have been a little more palatable, it felt wrong. It felt wrong to the story. And so I wrote it and I thought, I don't know if this is going to go over well. Like, I don't know, but it felt wrong to write it any other way. So yeah, the end. I didn't know.
Well, I thought the end was very true to horror. Like, I think that you kind of did the right thing according to the, not expectations, but to kind of like the real theme of it being in the horror genre. I had a little guilt of my own when I wrote my novella that I kind of didn't dive really hard into the horror genre. And in my mind, it was. But then when it was a finished product, I was like, yeah, it kind of rides the line of thriller. And that's not a bad thing. Right. But I could see where if you're expecting horror, you kind of want the horror ending. And I feel like you're
talking about Bury the Child, right?
Yeah,
that's horror.
It is.
Absolutely. Just because there's no chainsaws and doesn't mean it's
minus
not
the
horror.
chainsaw. I thought the ending of your book did a really good job of staying true to, like, all right, we get the badge here. Like, this is a good horror story. Like, because you could have ended it in a much, like you said, you could have ended it in a much different way. And I think that true, like, people really looking for a good horror story are really going to enjoy the ending, because I think that it's right there. Because you could have put this thing to bed a couple of chapters before without taking it to that place and left people just hanging on a grief string. And you were like, oh no, we're not done. And I was like, good. Because like the ending was, I thought, great. Because of the elements that you built into the front of the book, a bit of the supernatural horror kind of stuff, it naturally lent itself to the story to end it the way you did. So I was again, no spoilers, but I really appreciated the way you ended the book from a horror reader's perspective. Because when I closed it, I was like, that's a good horror story.
Well, thank you. Oh, that's such a relief to hear too.
Now, it's just my opinion. We'll see what happens.
So far, the reviews that are coming in are pretty good. Pretty good. Most of them are positive.
So this one's March. And you have other projects coming out soon that I know about.
I do. Speaking of Appalachian horror, I have through Crystal Lake Publishing, they're doing their Dark Tide series. And I'm going to be in book 13, which is The Devil's Backbone. And I have a novella called The Gatherer in that. And it's also with Ronald Kelly and Laurel Hightower.
Right. I've
So,
seen you guys talking about this on socials, and I'm like, dude, this
yeah.
looks so good.
I'm really excited about that. It was so much fun working with Ronald Kelly and Laurel Hightower. They're both great. They reached out to me last year toward the end. No, early last year, like the beginning of last year, and I'm like, hey, we need a third person. Do you want to? Because it's Ronald Kelly basically came up with this fictional mountain range called the Devil's Backbone that goes from Kentucky through Virginia and to Tennessee. And each of us is from those states. So we each wrote a story for our state. And when they asked me, I was like, well, I'm like on the beach, like, but I've been to the mountains. They're like, that's fine.
They could have chosen West Virginia instead of Virginia, but you were like, yeah, I'm good. I got this. And then you go and put this book out. It's got the mountains in it. You're good. You're covered.
I know.
See, got your card.
Yeah.
And
then
then
the novel in July.
Yeah, I was going to say that you have a novel coming out this summer.
Yep, in July through Brigade's Gate Press. Oh. And that one's called Bloodstains by Gaslit.
Yeah. I can't wait for that one.
That's my vampire book. So
love it.
I'm excited.
Now, all of this is happening in like 7 months.
Holy cow! I know. Well, each book was written in a different year. It's not like I'm not that productive. So I wrote Bloodstains by Gaslight in 2021.
Gotcha.
And In Excess of Dark was 2022, and I wrote the Dark Tides one last year. So I'm writing about a book a year, but they all happen to be releasing this year.
I love it. Well, I think it's important for people to hear that, because sometimes, and this goes for readers and writers, sometimes readers are like, I'm waiting for this story. They don't even realize the story's already been written.
Yeah.
And there's other elements. For writers, sometimes I think there's this pressure to produce like insane amounts of content in a short period of time.
Yeah.
And then to have like fairly immediate recognition of that. And the reality is, depending on whether you're working with a publisher or self-publishing or working with an indie versus a bigger, top 5, like, or the big 5 or whatever, there's different timelines with all these things. And for you to be experiencing all of these publications in such a tight window is really exciting, considering you're not publishing like out of your own press. You're not publishing these things. They're going out via other publishers.
Yeah. This is really cool. Really exciting for me. Yeah.
Really cool.
Like, I've had short stories published by other publishers, but I've never had a book, my own book. So right. I'm excited about this transition into the trad publishing world.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you're in good hands, and I can't wait to read all of them. And everyone listening to this is going to run out and grab every copy as soon as it's available.
It's exactly what's going to happen.
Or else the chainsaw. So what are you currently... Okay, like, I have to back up because that was going to be my last question. I have to ask one question before that, because you know me, I'm big on music and listening to music while I write, and just the influence that music has on me. To me, like, my life is split between 2 arts. Mm-hmm. And was there certain music that kind of inspired you while you were writing this? Was there anything that it could have been while you were writing, it could have just been part of your life during the writing of this, something that really kind of just stood out to you as influential, kind of pulled your heart in a certain direction while you were writing? And I'm catching you off guard. I did not.
No, that's fine. There's not.
Really? I thought you were going to say like Slayer, Rain in Blood, or something crazy.
No, I do not listen to music when I write. I just don't listen to music outside of things, but I don't really think of music usually, unless there's like a certain time frame, or unless it really, really reminds me of something in my own life. Then yeah, but not with this book. With this book, it was so outside of anything I've ever really experienced that I didn't even know what kind of playlist that I would put to it because it's so sad. It's so dark. So this book was just silence. It was silence and it was static.
Nice.
Yeah.
You said it. I wasn't going to say it. It's like, there's a, remember that word, guys, static. It's a thing. I love that, that you don't listen to music as an inspiration to your story, just as much as I would love someone having music as a big inspiration for their work. And I'm not just saying that to be like, neutral on the response or anything, but like, to me, there's times when I can't listen while I write, and there's other times where I just absolutely have to. And I tend to have stuff playing anyways, but I listen to dark, crazy stuff anyways. So it's like kind of just goes with the flow. But like, I couldn't write like half of the things I'm writing while listening to some of the upbeat music that I listen to, because it wouldn't work out. So I get it. And sometimes silence is the perfect music. So
what music would you put to it? What music do you think?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm going to be a little biased in my response here, because I just listened to a whole lot of Kristen Lean. I don't know if it might be Line. She is phenomenal. She does looping viola work.
Write her down.
Yeah. And it's all instrumental, and it's all kind of dark, and it's just pulls at your heart. So if you're writing grief horror, she has an album out, or she has several albums out, but her most recent one's called Elpis, Elpis.
Okay.
And I actually reference her as the top influence in the back of my recent, my debut novel I'm putting out in a couple of weeks here, Burn the Girls. In the back of that book, I reference her, and I've connected with her on Threads. I met her on Threads.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, you look cool. Your music sounds amazing. I'm like, wait. And I looked it up, and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. So yeah, that was one of the influences. And the other is Leprous, the band Leprous. They have a song called The Sky is Red, and it's kind of been a resounding theme through what I've been writing these last three books, but it's pretty intense stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
I got a whole list.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are you reading these days? Is there,
reading?
yeah. Cause like I had to take a break from writing like obsessively and read a bunch of books to kind of reset my mind, give me a little bit more inspiration, give me a chance to breathe a bit. So what about you? What are you reading these days?
I just finished a few books, and posted them on my page. In January, I read Foxfire by Rowan Hill, and a couple arcs I've read and posted about, but they're not out yet. But currently, the ones that I'm reading right now that I haven't finished yet are Come With Me by Ronald Malfi.
Oh.
Grief horror.
I haven't read it.
Oh my God. I'm like, I don't even think I'm 10% in, and it's ripping my heart out. It is really well done. I've never read Malfi before. This is my first Malfi, and I'm just barely into it, and it is tragic and intriguing, and I can't stop.
That's a good sign.
Yeah. And also Paul Tremblay's Paul Bear's Club.
I haven't read it.
I'm a little more than halfway through that. That's fun. That's vampire? Is it vampire? We don't know. It's Tremblay, so it's kind of ambiguous so far.
Yeah. I haven't read the Paul Bear's Club yet. And I haven't read Malfi either, which is like a big, I'm sure I'm making a huge mistake. Dude, I just read like Josh Mallerman for the first time last spring.
Oh,
I was like,
that's great too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to catch up, It's like all the great stuff. Yeah, you and I spoke beforehand that I was reading Brian Bowyer's Old Too Soon. Brutal. Brutal. If you ask me give me an example of extreme horror, I'd say you go read that book. It is the most violent thing I've ever read. So, okay. So Malfi, got it. Come With Me, and Paul Tremblay's The Paul Bear's Club. What am I missing, Red? Am I missing anything? Is there anything you want to share about the book that I haven't asked that we haven't mentioned?
Just that it's weird and it's a really fast read and it's dark, and if read the trigger warning. There's no spoilers in the trigger warning. Just read it. But it will, like the trigger warning I think says, and again, this is not a spoiler, that the book explores in excess grief, trauma, suicidal thoughts. So if you're in a dark place, it might not be the book for you.
Yeah, that is a good point to put on the end of here, because I did not anticipate when I wrote a grief horror laden book that I was going to have to deal with that every single time I talked to someone about the book I wrote. Like, they're like, oh, it's almost always like an older lady on an airplane. And I'm like, oh, you write? What do you write? I'm like, I wrote a book called Fear the Child. They're like, oh. And I'm not even kidding. The number of times that person has lost a child far outweighs the number of times they haven't.
Oh Lord, that's
for some reason, it's terrible. It's so sad, but I didn't anticipate that. So I really appreciate you sharing that trigger warning with everybody. And it is, to me, it's a healthy, I guess is a good way to close out a discussion about grief horror. I think that by exploring these things, it sometimes helps us process them. And it may be helpful to do that in a fictional world, where there aren't real consequences to what we're reading and thinking about and doing. It gives you a chance to kind of feel your way through what's going on. I have a friend of mine who does work like that for a living, working with people who have lost children. And she was like adamant about this being a part of that process at some point. It's not always at the same time for everybody. But you might reach a certain point where reading these types of things is actually kind of therapeutic. Especially when they're done in the context of like your book is, where it's, it is definitely fiction. There's not like this blurred line between nonfiction and fiction in regards to the book. And you don't try and force feed any type of like opinions or thoughts on grief onto people. You just give them a chance to experience it through someone else. So
there was actually a person in their review of In Excess of Dark, they said that they had just lost somebody when they started reading it. And they had to put the book down for a while, but they picked it back up again, and they're glad that they did, because it actually helped them at least come to the conclusion. I'm paraphrasing that they shouldn't let themselves sit in that darkness for too long. So they actually appreciated the book and what it said about grief. So that was really nice to hear.
Yeah, that is great. I think you did such a good job with keeping this true to its roots of, it's not just founded in grief. It's founded in a great story, a fun story, a really dark story, some high points where I was like, yes, and some low points where I'm like, damn. It was a really good book in regards to kind of carrying the reader through all the different areas. And to me, that made it really rich. And I really enjoyed it. And I can't wait to read everything else you got coming out this year. It's going to be a fantastic year in the Red Lagoe back catalog. We get to the end of the year, we're going to all be sitting back with our tea going, that was a good year for Red Lagoe. It really was. So Red, thanks so much for joining us again, and tell people where they can find you and connect with you. Where can they keep up with everything going on?
You can find me in my house. Don't find me in my house.
Don't find me in my house.
I am at redlagoe.com and at Red Lagoe across social media platforms. I'm mostly on Twitter, a little bit on Instagram and Facebook. I'm trying to use those a little more. I'm also on Threads and Blue Sky, but I'm not very active on there yet.
And I think you got a pretty strong TikTok game.
Oh, that's right. I do have TikTok. I don't even know. My TikTok is so random, though. I'll put some art on there. I'll complain about something on there.
See, that's the one platform I'm rarely ever on. And when I go there, I see Red Lagoe because I've tried to follow you. My account's all messed up. So anyways, I can't follow anyone on TikTok for some reason. And I'm waiting for them to try and resolve that. But I've gone and tried to connect with all these people. I was like looking at your account. I'm like, oh, there's also this great content on here that's not like on.
I wouldn't call it great.
So you inspired me through your TikTok account, because I don't do TikTok yet. So good stuff. All right, guys. Well, you know the deal. Go check out our website, get on the email lists, check out all the socials, envelop yourself in the darkness that is Red Lagoe's wonderful world of fiction. Check out all the stuff she's produced previous to now. Check out In Excess of Dark in March, and then keep your eyes peeled for everything coming in the next couple months, because it's going to be awesome. Thanks for being with me again, Red. You're awesome. And let's see, we've got, we'll just have to do this again. Like, I don't know, sometime in the summer.
Yeah. After that next book.
Yeah. And maybe I can bribe Laurel to coming on between now and then. So then you guys can we could do a panel when you guys do
that'd be fun.
Do the release. That'd be cool. All right, guys, there's my promise I won't be able to keep. You have it now. All right, guys. We'll talk to you guys in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.